The Colorado Buffaloes control their own fate with 2 games to go in the Big 12, and what a turnaround from last year in the Pac-12. Coach Prime's team went 4-8, 1-8 in conference play. This year, 8-2 overall, 6-1 in conference play. And if they win their last 2 games at Arrowhead against Kansas and at home against Oklahoma State, the Buffs are going to be in the Big 12 championship game in their first year in the conference. With a chance to really control their own fate to the college football playoff as well, with 2 of the best players, if not the 2 best players in college football, in Travis Hunter and Deion Sanders. Chris Hassel joined by Josh Pate. I thought I had a T-shirt underneath, but I wore the tank top today, so I felt like it's black though.
Oh, classy.
Could have worked.
Wow.
Can do this over again? No, we got to keep going. Black works with the theme, Colorado. Right. Let's just say, Josh, that they do win out and they win the Big 12. They get to the college football playoff. With that quarterback, with Travis Hunter playing wide receiver and defensive back better than anybody, what kind of a factor can they be in the playoff?
I think people would call them a 2-man team. They would be wrong, because if Colorado was just a 2-man team, they wouldn't be in this position yet. The rest of the team would be anonymous. There's a big difference in I don't know these guys versus these guys aren't good. Colorado has run the ball better this year. Not elite, but they've run it good enough. They've played much better defense this year. I think you got Broyles Award vibes around that defensive coordinator because of that. And then you talk about Travis Hunter. Then you talk about Shedeur. And then you talk about getting a game to the 4th quarter, Christopher. If they can get those games to the 4th quarter, can you imagine just turning on a playoff game? And it's Colorado versus, I don't know, whoever, Texas A&M. And it's early 4th quarter, and the other side is puckering tighter and tighter because Colorado's getting looser and looser. That, on top of already, I think, being the story of college football, would be the story of the college football playoff.
Would they be the Big 12 team with the best chance to win a game or 2 in the playoff?
By far. I think it's the highest variance team, because they also could get run out of the building. But there's a certain limitation on what any of these other Big 12 teams could accomplish in a tournament featuring the best teams in the country. This team at least has 2 of, as you mentioned, the best players in the country. And on those stages, we've seen this time and time again. We've seen stars born, and I think in the future we will see stars born in this tournament, much the same way we've seen it happen in the basketball tournament. Now, that's the first and last time that you ever hear me compare those 2 tournaments, because one is not the other. It's PB&J. But I do think because they have those guys, those are game breakers. Those are guys that you have to scheme against. I don't think many other Big 12 teams have that. In totality, there's probably a lower ceiling on them than Colorado.
And those 2 guys could go 1-2 in the NFL draft, which is coming up next summer. Want to bring in Richard Johnson for more on the path forward for Coach Prime and these Colorado Buffaloes. Richard helped write an article at CBSSports.com on the future of Coach Prime in this program. Richard, why is there a growing consensus from what you've heard that Coach Prime could stay as both of his sons go?
Chris, I think the overarching theme of Coach Prime's tenure at Colorado has been a continued moving of the goalposts, right? Everybody always says what Coach Prime in Colorado can't do. Well, they just went 4-8 last year. Well, Shedeur and Travis are going to go to the NFL, and Deion is going to follow. Well, they're not going to be able to contend in the Big 12 with a over-under win total at 5.5 coming into the season. Well, they sit 2 games away from playing for a berth in the college football playoff, in all likelihood in the Big 12 championship game. So we need to stop talking about what Coach Prime can't do and talk about what he can do. And what he can do, in my opinion, is stay at Colorado and continue to build this program into the winner that he promised when he said, we're coming, we're coming, we're coming. And now that has changed a little bit to we're here. You've seen what they've started to do on the recruiting trail. Juju Lewis, former commit from USC, decommitted just last weekend. There's a whole lot of people in the recruiting world that expect him to end up at Colorado. He would then be the quarterback to replace Deion Sanders and likely start day 1 next season. They've got some flips in the pipeline. They've started to make some noise, and we know that they will be heavy in the transfer portal. So the more conversations that I and my colleagues, Brandon Marcello and John Talty, started to have in the industry over the last couple weeks, the tide has turned. The message has shifted. People are now expecting him to stick around. It's not just a foregone conclusion that he would leave at the end of the season like it seemed coming into this year.
And you know what else? Like 15 good points were made here by Richard. So the first one is, he's right. There's always been a sliding scale with Deion. People made up their mind on whether they liked him or not the moment he walked in the door. And if you liked him, then he did no wrong. And if you didn't like him, you were never going to give him credit. Okay, well, the folks who didn't like him were a little shook right now because he's done infinitely more than candidly even folks like me expected that he'd be able to do. But as Richard said, it was never, oh, they hit their over-win total. It's, well, they won't make a bowl. And then they make a bowl, they won't make the playoff. Then they make the playoff. I swear to you, you watch and see, well, they're not going to win a game in the playoff. Like, that's some dunk. The next thing is Richard talked about a changing of the vibe around what Deion's going to do. You know what that could be? It could be nothing more than Deion sees it a different way now than he may have seen it a few weeks ago. People with more information process it and then recalibrate how they see their future. You and I do that. Richard does that in this business. How might a coach do that in his line of work?
Sure, and Deion Sanders is a guy who might be able to say, hey, I don't want to play here, I want to go here. Because we've seen that before. I mean, Eli Manning did it 20 plus years ago in the NFL. But Richard, I have seen some people on social media, really no hardcore reports or anything, that maybe Shedeur and Deion try to go somewhere as a package. Is that anything you've heard at the next level, at the NFL level, obviously?
I have not talked to anybody credible with ties in the NFL who expect Deion Sanders to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. I just think it's something that a lot of people say because it makes sense. I think people talk a lot about maybe Deion goes to Florida State. First and foremost, I don't think Florida State's going to fire Mark Norvell, even though that program has gone absolutely south this year. But it's just something people say. People seem to have a problem with him at Colorado and or doing this at Colorado. It's sort of what me and Josh are getting at here. It's the scale is always sliding. The goalposts are always shifting. Nobody just kind of lets Deion play out the string and waits to see what he's going to do next. Everybody sort of has to make a bold proclamation about what he's going to do next because Deion is such a polarizing figure. Like Josh was talking about earlier in this conversation, what he's built from a staff perspective, Royals Award candidate Rob Livingston brought him in as defensive coordinator from the NFL from the Cincinnati Bengals. He's done great with this defense. Bill Lodeholt, offensive coordinator, offensive line coach, former offensive line veteran in the NFL. He's come in and shorn up some things on the offensive line. Having that anchor left tackle, Jordan Seaton, has helped keep Shedeur Sanders at least a little more clean than they did last year. There's still a little bit of a liability in pass protection, but he's a little bit more clean, not taking that many sacks. And then Pat Shurmur, as offensive coordinator, elevated from offensive analyst late last season, has changed this offense around. It's not just Travis Hunter. It's LeJontay Wester. It's Will Shepard. It's Jimmy Horn. It's all the pieces that they have in the passing game beyond just what Travis is able to give them that have this Colorado team trending in the right direction. And Josh, we talk about all these SEC teams playing their best ball right now in November. Well, Colorado's playing their best football in November.
Yeah, that is the other thing that makes them, back to your question a second ago, the most dangerous, because they're the ones peaking. They're the ones, they exhibit the characteristics of teams that do something in the playoff. Whether they do it or not is independent of what Richard just said. The other thing is, have you noticed, as they've become better on the football field, a lot of the people who made the noise last year have been more and more silent. It's like in the aggregate, there's less conversation about Colorado and Deion the more they win, which just goes to prove to me, at least anecdotally, there were a lot of people in the room that could not have cared less how good a football coach he's going to be. Like, that stuff doesn't interest them as much as the drama and the off the field and this and that. And it's the same thing that happens a lot of times maybe with G5 teams. A coach goes in there, or a lower level Power 5 team. Coach goes in there, he wins and has the audacity to succeed. No one even wants to talk about that. Most of the folks out there just want to talk about, well, where should he go next? Well, how about let the season play out? You know, maybe he's happy where his feet are. That has happened before.
And he's 2 wins away from a Big 12 championship game, 3 wins away from a college football playoff. Amazing what Coach Prime has done there in just his 2nd season at Colorado. Richard Johnson and some of our other writers have a great article right now at CBSSports.com on the future of Coach Prime at Colorado and what he might be doing down the road. Our thanks to Richard and to Josh Pate. Josh is in studio today because he's going to be doing the Josh Pate College Football Show live tonight right after the rankings release, right?
Hot off the rankings release.
Hot
yes.
off the presses, and you'll get his hot takes on what the committee feels is the right thing to do with 2 weeks to go in the regular season before we hit championship week.